The Galactic Council chamber was filled with worried voices. Representatives from over 100 alien species sat in their special seats, all talking at once. The room was huge, with tall glass windows showing the stars outside. The ceiling glowed with soft blue light that made everyone look a bit sick. "Quiet," shouted the head counselor, a tall blue alien with 4 arms. His voice echoed in the big room. "We must speak one at a time or we will solve nothing." The room grew silent. Everyone knew why they were there. The Void Swarm had destroyed 3 more planets this week alone. The Council's best ships and weapons were not stopping the enemy. The Void Swarm kept coming, eating everything in its path. A small green alien stood up. "Our best battle plans have failed. The Void Swarm learns too quickly. It sees our patterns and breaks through our lines every time." "What about the new shield technology from the Zorvan scientists?" asked another council member. "Failed," said a robot-like voice from across the room. The swarm adapted in 3.6 hours. The council members looked at each other with fear in their eyes. The Void Swarm was not like any enemy they had faced before. It was not a race or a species. It was like a living cloud that moved through space, breaking down and absorbing everything it touched. It thought as one mind but could split into millions of small parts. It learned from every battle and never made the same mistake twice. In the back of the room, a purple-skinned alien with spots on his face stood up. He was not often noticed at these meetings. His race, the Aquarians, were known as deep thinkers but not warriors. "I have a suggestion," he said quietly, "but you will not like it." The head counselor nodded at him to continue. "We should ask the humans for help." The room exploded with noise again. Some aliens laughed. Others looked angry. The humans. They have only been part of the council for 50 years. They are barely out of their own solar system. Shouted a tall, bird-like alien. "Their technology is simple compared to ours," said another. "They are violent and unpredictable," added a third voice. The purple Aquarian waited for the noise to die down. "That is exactly why we need them. The Void Swarm predicts our moves because we all follow the same logic. The same patterns of thought. The same rules of war that the Council has used for thousands of years." He touched a button on his wrist and an image appeared in the middle of the room. It showed humans fighting each other on a battlefield. It was from Earth's history. Humans have been fighting each other since they could pick up sticks. They do not follow logical patterns in battle. They trick. They surprise. They do things that make no sense until they work. The council members watched the images with disgust and fascination. "And one more thing," the Aquarian added. "We don't need their current soldiers. We need their old warriors, the ones with experience, the ones who fought in their messiest wars before they united their planet." The head counselor's 4 hands gripped his desk tightly. "Are you suggesting we ask retired human military leaders to fight our most dangerous enemy? Elderly humans?" "Yes," said the Aquarian. "Especially the older ones. They think in ways none of us can understand." After hours of arguing, the council finally agreed. They would ask Earth for help. Not for their ships, which were simple compared to council technology. Not for their weapons, which the council had improved upon already. But for their old warriors whose minds worked in strange and unpredictable ways. On Earth, in a small house on a hillside in what was once called South Korea, an old man sat on his porch. He was drinking tea and looking at the mountains. His hair was white and his face had many wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp and clear. This was General Tae-ho Kim. Once, he had led Earth forces in the Mars colony uprising. When settlers on Mars tried to break away from Earth control, he had won that war with fewer soldiers and older ships than the enemy had. Now 20 years later, he lived alone, growing vegetables and reading books. A small light on his communication device blinked. He picked it up and saw it was from his old friend, Do-Yoon Park, who had been his communications expert during the war. "Tai-ho," said Do-Yoon's voice. "Have you been contacted yet?"
"About what?"
asked Tae-ho. His voice was rough from age but still commanded respect. "The council, the aliens. They're asking for us." Tae-ho put down his tea. "What do they want?" "They're losing a war against something called the Void Swarm. They want human military leaders. Specifically older ones like us." Tae-ho almost laughed. "The council? Asking humans for military help? The same council that told us our ways of fighting were primitive and cruel?" "The same," said Do-Yoon. "They've asked for you specifically. You and other commanders from the Mars War." Taeho looked out at the mountains again. He had been at peace here. His fighting days were long over. He was 78 years old now, but he felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. When do they want us? He asked, as soon as possible. The situation is bad, Taeho. This void swarm has destroyed entire systems. Billions dead. Taeho stood up, feeling the ache in his knees. Contact the others. All of them. Sangmin, Jiwan, Hanel, Eunji. Everyone who served with us. Already working on it, said Do-yoon. A council ship will arrive tomorrow to pick you up. Taeho went inside his house and opened a closet he rarely touched. Inside was his old uniform. It probably wouldn't fit anymore. He had gotten thinner with age. But somewhere in the house was his old metal case, and inside that was his commander pin. That at least would still fit on whatever new uniform they gave him. He sat down at his small desk and began to write notes. He would need to tell his neighbor to watch his house and take care of his garden. He would need to bring his old battle plans and strategy books. Most importantly, he would need to prepare his mind for war again. As the sun set over the mountains, Taeho Kim, retired general and war hero, began to remember all the battles he had fought, all the strategies he had used, all the unpredictable, illogical, very human decisions that had won him victories when logic said he should lose. The Galactic Council thought they were getting a group of old human warriors to advise them. What they were really getting was something they had never seen before. Human creativity in its purest form, shaped by decades of experience. Taeho smiled as he packed a small bag. The aliens would be surprised by what a group of old humans could do. The next day, a council ship landed in the field next to Taeho's house. It was sleek and silver, much more advanced than any human ship. A ramp extended and two aliens walked out. One was tall and green with a long neck. The other was short and blue with 6 eyes. General Taeho Kim, the tall one asked, speaking perfect Korean. Taeho nodded. He had put on his best clothes, though not his uniform. That would come later. I am Liaison Zeph of the Galactic Council, said the alien. We have been sent to bring you to Europa Station, where you will meet the other human commanders and be briefed on the situation. How many others have agreed to help? Asked Taeho. 66 other humans so far, said the alien. All veterans of your various Earth conflicts and the Mars uprising. Taeho nodded. That was good. He had worked with many of them before. The rest he knew by reputation. I'm ready, he said, picking up his small bag. As they walked up the ramp into the ship, the alien seemed nervous. General Kim, I must ask, do you really believe you can help against the Void Swarm? Our best military minds have failed. Taeho looked at the alien with steady eyes. Your best military minds think alike. They follow rules and patterns. The Void Swarm has learned those patterns, yes? The alien nodded. Then you need minds that don't follow the same rules. Taeho smiled slightly. And there's nothing less predictable than a human who has spent a lifetime fighting other humans. The ship's door closed behind them, and within moments they had lifted off. Taeho watched through a window as his little house and garden grew smaller below. He might never see it again, but if this void swarm was as dangerous as they said, his peaceful retirement wouldn't matter much anyway. Not if there was no galaxy left to retire in. His mind was already beginning to work on the problem, pulling up old strategies, thinking of new ones. By the time they reached Europa Station, he would have questions ready. And soon after that, he would have a plan. The old general leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. It was time for one last battle. The Europa 9 station hung in space like a giant metal flower, its central hub connected to 5 long arms, each ending in a large round section. Lights blinked across its surface and ships of all sizes moved around it. It was the biggest human-built structure in space, but it still looked small next to the council ships docked nearby. Inside one of the station's large meeting rooms, General Taeho Kim stood with his back straight despite his age. He watched as more humans arrived, each escorted by alien council representatives who looked nervous or confused. These were not young soldiers. They were men and women in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. Their hair was gray or white. Some walked with canes or had mechanical body parts to replace what they had lost in old wars. But they all moved with purpose, and their eyes were sharp and alert. Do-yoon Park approached Taeho with a smile. His old friend had arrived yesterday and had been helping to organize things. They're all here, said Do-yoon. Every person you asked for, Taeho nodded. Good. The council will brief us soon on what we're facing. They're worried about our age, Do-yoon said with a small laugh. I heard two of them talking. They think we're too old to fight. We're not here to do the fighting ourselves, Taeho replied. We're here to think in ways they can't. Across the room, Colonel Ji-won Lee was examining her left arm. It was a council-made replacement for the one she had lost during the Neptune defense 30 years ago. The alien technology was far beyond what humans could make, but Ji-won had already figured out how to modify it. She had been a cybernetics expert before retirement, and her mind was still quick. Testing the new hardware? Asked Commander Sungmin Kang as he approached her. He was tall and thin, with a calm face that hid one of the most tactical minds in Earth's military history. During the Mars uprising, he had defeated an enemy fleet 3 times the size of his own by using asteroid fields in ways no one had thought possible. It's impressive, Ji-won admitted, moving the mechanical fingers of her new arm. But they built in limitations. Safety protocols. I've already removed most of them, Sungmin smiled. Of course you have. Nearby, Captain Hanul Choi was sitting quietly, her eyes closed. She had been Earth's best pilot, with reflexes that seemed impossible. Even now, at 69 years old, her neural response time was faster than most people half her age. She was mentally preparing, going through old flight patterns in her head. Major Yoon Ji-yoon was already causing problems. The weapons specialist had taken apart one of the Council's energy rifles and was rebuilding it on a table, much to the horror of the alien guards. You can't do that, one of them was saying. That weapon is calibrated precisely. It's calibrated poorly, Yoonji replied without looking up. Her hands moved quickly despite her 75 years. The energy flow is restricted. Whoever designed this was more worried about safety than effectiveness. A tall, green-skinned alien with a long neck entered the room. He wore the uniform of a High Council representative. Everyone grew quiet as he moved to the front of the room. Humans, he began, his voice translated perfectly into Earth Standard. I am Liaison Verdun. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you for coming. I know many of you have been enjoying your retirement years, and we apologize for interrupting that piece. Taeho stepped forward. We didn't come here for apologies, Liaison Verdun. We came to hear about the enemy we're facing. The alien nodded. Yes, of course. But first I should explain the advanced weaponry and tactical systems you'll be working with. Our technology is far beyond. He stopped speaking as Yoonji stood up from her table and held up the rifle she had been working on. Without a word, she aimed at a target display on the far wall and fired. The energy beam that shot out was twice as powerful as before, and hit the center of the target perfectly. Perhaps, Taeho said quietly as the alien stared in shock. You should tell us about the Void Swarm instead of your technology. We're quick learners when it comes to weapons. Verdun swallowed hard and nodded. Very well. Please, all of you, take a seat. The room darkened and a holographic display appeared in the center. It showed what looked like a dark cloud moving through space. The Void Swarm first appeared at the edge of Council space 2 years ago, Verdun explained. We don't know where it came from or what it really is. It acts like a single organism but can split into countless smaller parts. The display showed the dark cloud separating into millions of tiny pieces, then reforming. It consumes everything in its path, planets, ships, even energy itself. It breaks down matter and absorbs it, growing larger with each system it devours. Taeho watched carefully. How does it attack? What patterns does it follow? That's part of the problem, said Verdun. It learns and adapts with incredible speed. In our first battles, we destroyed large portions of it with our standard tactics, but it quickly learned to counter those tactics. By the third battle, it was predicting our moves before we made them. It's analyzing your patterns, said Sungmin, leaning forward. You're too predictable. Verdun looked uncomfortable. The Council's military has developed battle strategies refined over thousands of years. They are mathematically perfect. And that's exactly the problem, said Ji-won. Perfect patterns can be perfectly predicted. Humans learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy is to be unpredictable. Chaos within control, added Taeho. That's what you need against an enemy like this. Verdun didn't look convinced. We hoped you might advise our commanders on alternative approaches, but our ships and systems will still need to operate within established protocols. Taeho stood up. No, if you want our help, then you need to let us lead this our way, completely. The room was silent for a moment. Then Verdun nodded slowly. I will take your request to the council, but I must warn you they will not easily give command to, forgive me, elderly humans with outdated military experience. Yunji laughed, a sharp sound in the quiet room. Outdated? Your perfect council military is losing this war. How's that working out for you? Verdun left quickly after that. The humans gathered around Taiho, who was already deep in thought. They won't give us full control, said Doyun. Not at first. They will when they see what we can do, replied Taiho. But first we need to learn everything about this void swarm. Its movements, its reactions, its attacks and defenses. And we need to see the council's battle plans, added Sungmin. So we know exactly what not to do. The humans spent the next several hours reviewing all the data the council had provided. They watched recordings of battles, studied the swarm's behavior, and analyzed the council's failed strategies. As night cycle began on the station, they were still working. They always attack in the same way, Hanyul noted, watching a battle recording for the 10th time. The council ships form their perfect defensive patterns, and the swarm counters by splitting into exactly the right formation to break through. It's like watching a chess match where one player always makes the same opening moves, said Ji-won. Of course they're going to lose. Taiho had been quiet for a long time, taking everything in. Finally, he spoke. We need to show them a small demonstration of our approach. Something limited but effective. Once they see it works, they'll give us more control. What did you have in mind? Asked Yunji, her eyes lighting up. A small strike force, said Taiho. Just a few ships. We'll hit a section of the swarm that's separated from the main body. Hanyul will lead the pilots using flight patterns based on old Earth air combat maneuvers that no alien would recognize. He turned to Ji-won. Can you modify the ship's communication systems? I want to use an old Earth military code that isn't in any council database. Ji-won smiled. Give me 6 hours. Sungmin, work with Yunji on weapons configurations. Make them unpredictable. Variable power levels, irregular firing patterns, both nodded, already starting to plan. Doyun, you'll coordinate communications. Make sure our people can talk to each other, but the swarm can't predict what we're saying or doing. Doyun gave a mock salute. Just like old times. Taiho looked at his team. These were people he had fought beside decades ago. They were older now, their bodies not as strong, but their minds were sharp, filled with experiences and ideas that no council tactical computer could match. We'll start small, he said, but if it works, we'll take the fight to the main swarm. The next morning, Verdun returned with 3 other council representatives. They looked troubled. The council has, reluctantly, agreed to give you command of a small strike force, he announced. 6 ships with council observers on board. If your methods show promise, you may be given more resources. Taiho nodded. That's all we need for now. One of the other aliens, a blue-skinned female with 4 arms, stepped forward. We must warn you that the council expects this mission to follow safety protocols and, with respect, Taiho interrupted. If we followed your protocols, we'd get the same results you've been getting. Defeat. The alien looked offended, but said nothing more. We'll depart in 12 hours, Taiho continued. My team has already prepared our strategy and made the necessary modifications to the ships you've provided. Modifications? Verdun looked alarmed. What modifications? Unji smiled innocently. Just small adjustments to improve performance. Nothing to worry about. The council war room was impressive. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps and battle data. In the center was a large round table that projected detailed holograms above it. Around this table sat the highest military leaders of the Galactic Council. Admiral Zix of the Proxima Battalion drummed his 4 fingers on the table. He was a tall, gray-skinned alien with no hair and eyes that could see in multiple light spectrums. He had commanded council forces for over 70 years and had never lost a major battle until the Void Swarm appeared. Where are these humans? He asked impatiently. They requested this meeting, yet they make us wait. High Commander Eltrix, a female alien with blue scales and a reputation for strict discipline, checked the time display. They are actually 2 minutes early. We are just used to our own people arriving 10 minutes before meetings. As if on cue, the doors slid open and General Taiho Kim entered, followed by his core team. They were dressed in modified council uniforms that had been adjusted to fit human bodies better. Despite their age, they walked with confidence and purpose. Thank you for meeting with us, Taiho said, bowing slightly to the council leaders. It was an Earth gesture that most aliens didn't use, but they appreciated the respect it showed. Your small strike mission was unexpectedly successful, Admiral Zix admitted. The section of the Void Swarm you engaged was completely destroyed, with no losses to your fleet. That's why we're here, said Tejo. We believe we can apply the same tactics on a larger scale against the main swarm body. Tejo nodded to Sungmin, who touched a control panel. The hologram in the center of the table changed to show a complex battle plan. It looked chaotic, with ships positioned in seemingly random patterns and attack vectors. That made no logical sense. This is our proposed strategy, Tejo explained. The council commanders stared at the display with growing confusion and alarm. This is madness, hissed Admiral Zix finally. Your formations have deliberate weak points. Your attack vectors are unpredictable. There's no logical cohesion. Tejo nodded. Precisely. The Void Swarm operates on perfect prediction algorithms. They calculate responses based on optimal tactical decisions. They expect logical cohesion. Sungmin stepped forward, his voice steady despite the disapproving stares. Humanity's military history is defined by chaos, improvisation, and intentional irrationality. We don't fight according to optimal algorithms. We fight dirty. The council commanders looked at each other with concern. Show them, Tejo said quietly. Jiwan touched another control, and the hologram changed to show historical footage from Earth's many wars. Ancient battles with swords and spears, world wars with tanks and planes, the Mars uprising with space fighters and orbital platforms. For thousands of years, humans fought humans, Jiwan explained. We evolved to outthink opponents who think like us, which means thinking in ways no logical system would predict, and the footage showed battles where smaller forces defeated larger ones, through surprise and deception. It showed strategies that seemed to make no sense until they resulted in victory. Your military doctrine is based on mathematical perfection, Tejo continued. Every move calculated for maximum efficiency, but the Void Swarm has learned to predict and counter this perfection. We need to be imperfect, deliberately imperfect. Hanel stood and moved to the hologram controls. She adjusted the display to show fighter formations. Your pilots fly in mathematically perfect patterns, she said. The swarm reads and counters this predictability. My squadron will fly in formations based on ancient Korean dance movements. Try predicting that, she demonstrated, showing how the ships would move in flowing artistic patterns that nevertheless created effective attack and defense positions. Dance movements? Sputtered a council commander. You want our elite pilots to fly based on human cultural dances? Yes, Hanul said simply. Because the swarm has never seen Korean traditional dance. It has no reference point to predict the movements. Yoonji added quietly.
And sometimes the optimal strategy is to appear weak?
Exactly where you are strongest, she manipulated the hologram to show ships that appeared damaged or vulnerable, but were actually prepared to unleash devastating attacks. Deception, she explained. Another human specialty. The council commanders were silent for a long moment, taking in everything they had heard. Finally, High Commander Eltrix spoke. Your small strike mission was successful, this is true, but that was against an isolated portion of the swarm. The main body is far more powerful and adaptive. Which is why we need more ships, said Tejo. Not to create a larger perfect formation, but to create multiple unpredictable ones. How many ships would you require? Asked Admiral Zix, his tone suggesting he was humoring the humans rather than taking them seriously. 200, Tejo replied without hesitation. The room erupted in protests. 200 ships was a significant portion of the Council's remaining fleet. Impossible. Absurd. We cannot risk such resources on untested theories. Tejo waited for the noise to die down. You've tested your theories against the swarm many times. You've lost ships, planets, entire systems. What do you have to lose by trying our approach? The oldest of the council commanders, a small alien with white fur and 6 eyes, leaned forward. Tell me, General Kim, if the Void Swarm adapts to your unpredictability. What then? Then we adapt faster, Tejo answered. That's another human specialty. We've had to adapt quickly throughout our history just to survive on our own planet. Our climate changed. Our food sources shifted. We fought each other with constantly evolving weapons and tactics. He looked around the room at the alien faces. Your species have had thousands of years of peace and stability. That's a wonderful achievement, but it means you've lost the ability to think like survivors, to improvise when everything goes wrong. The room was quiet again. The council commanders looked troubled. "We need time to discuss this," said Admiral Zix finally. Tejo nodded. "Of course. But remember, the swarm doesn't wait. Every day you delay, more worlds are at risk." The humans left the war room and waited in an adjoining chamber. They sat or stood in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "They won't agree," said Duyun after a while. "They're too set in their ways." "They'll agree," Tejo replied, "because they have no other options. They're losing this war and they know it." After 2 hours, they were called back into the war room. The council commanders looked tired, as if they had been arguing the entire time. "We have reached a decision," said Admiral Zix. "You will be given command of 50 ships initially." "Not enough," Tejo said immediately. "If your initial engagement shows promise, more ships will be added to your command. Up to the 200 you requested." Tejo considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Acceptable. But we will need complete command authority. No council observers countermanding our orders during battle." This caused another stir among the commanders, but High Commander Eltrix raised a hand for silence. "Agreed," she said. "But we request that your battle plans be reviewed by our tactical experts before engagement." "Reviewed but not changed," said Tejo firmly. "You can look at our plans, but you cannot modify them." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "When do we begin?" asked Sungmin. "The ships will be ready in 3 days," said Admiral Zix. "Will that be enough time for you to prepare your dance formations and deceptions?" There was a hint of mockery in his voice, but Tejo ignored it. "Yes," he said simply. 3 days is enough." As they left the war room, Yunji fell into step beside Tejo. 50 ships is not much against the main swarm," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "But it's enough to show them what we can do. And once they see that, they'll give us the rest. And if they don't," Tejo smiled slightly, "then we'll have to get creative. Another human specialty." For the next 3 days, the human commanders worked non-stop. They reviewed data on the void swarm's behavior. They studied the ships they would be commanding. They prepared battle plans that looked like madness to the council tacticians, but made perfect sense to the human mind. Ji-Wan worked with council engineers to modify the communication systems of their fleet. "We'll use old Earth military codes," she explained. "Morse code, Native American smoke signals translated into data bursts, even children's secret languages." "The swarm won't be able to break these codes?" asked a doubtful council engineer. "Eventually, yes," Ji-Wan admitted. "But it won't matter because we'll keep changing them, mid-battle if necessary." Sung-Min spent his time creating tactical simulations that the council computers struggled to process. They kept reporting errors because his battle plans didn't follow logical patterns. "That's the point," he told the frustrated alien technicians. "If your computers can't predict what we'll do, neither can the swarm." Hanul trained the pilots personally. Many of them were the best in the council fleet, with centuries of experience following precise flight patterns. "Forget everything you know about formation flying," she told them. "Today you learn to dance." She showed them movements from traditional Korean dances, the flowing grace of the Bukechum fan dance, the swirling patterns of the Gangang Sulai circle dance. Then she translated these movements into flight paths. "Feel the rhythm," she instructed. "Don't just follow the pattern, feel it." The council observation deck was silent as the 50 ships under human command moved into position. The large viewing screen showed the fleet approaching the edge of the void swarm, which looked like a dark cloud in space. Inside the cloud, occasional flashes of energy could be seen, like lightning in a storm. "They're not in standard defense formation," muttered one of the council observers, a tall alien with purple skin. "They're not in any formation I recognize," replied another. Admiral Zix stood with his arms crossed, watching with narrow eyes. "Let us see if these human tactics are as effective as they claim." On the command ship, Tejo sat in the captain's chair. Around him, his team monitored different aspects of the battle. Ji-Wan handled communications. Sung-Min oversaw tactical operations. Duyun coordinated between the ships, and Yunji controlled weapon systems. Hanul was not on the command ship. She was leading the fighter squadron personally. "All ships report ready," said Ji-Wan. Tejo nodded. "Begin Phase 1. Execute Thermopylae maneuver." The council observers watching the battle looked confused as the human fleet suddenly broke apart, with ships moving in seemingly random directions. What does Thermopylae maneuver mean? Demanded a Centaurian officer. And why are they talking in code? Our translators can't make sense of their communications. It's deliberate, said a communications expert. They're using old Earth military references that aren't in our databases. On the battlefield, the 50 ships had formed what appeared to be a chaotic, scattered pattern. Some ships drifted close together, while others moved to positions that seemed to leave them isolated and vulnerable. The Void Swarm reacted exactly as Taeho had predicted. It sent tendrils of itself toward the apparently weaker sections of the human fleet, attempting to surround and destroy the isolated ships. Swarm is responding, reported Sungmin. Moving to engulf Delta and Gamma sections. Perfect, said Taeho. Execute Incheon landing. Suddenly, the ships that had appeared vulnerable revealed that their positions had been carefully planned. As the swarm tendrils extended to attack them, other ships moved in from unexpected angles, catching the swarm between them. Yunji's modified weapons fired, their power levels and patterns changing constantly. The swarm, unable to predict the attacks, suffered heavy damage before it could adapt. First blood to us, said Yunji with satisfaction. The swarm is trying to analyze our weapon patterns, but it can't find a consistent algorithm. In the fighter squadron, Hanul led her pilots through maneuvers that looked like a beautiful, deadly dance. The small ships moved in flowing patterns based on ancient Korean traditions, attacking the swarm from angles it couldn't predict. Crane wing formation, Hanul ordered over the comm. Remember the rhythm, not just the pattern. The fighters shifted into a formation resembling a bird's wing, then flowed smoothly into attacking positions, striking deep into the swarm's structure. Back on the council observation deck, the alien military leaders watched in confusion and growing amazement. Their ships are moving in patterns that make no tactical sense, said one officer, yet they're causing significant damage to the swarm. The swarm is trying to adapt, noted another, pointing to the way the dark cloud was shifting and changing. But it can't predict what the human fleet will do next because there's no logical pattern to predict. Admiral Zix remained silent, his expression unreadable. On the command ship, Taeho received reports from all sections of his small fleet. They had struck the first blow successfully, but the swarm was already beginning to adjust its tactics. The swarm is pulling back, consolidating its mass, reported Sungmin. It's trying to analyze what we're doing. Good, said Taeho. Now for Phase 2. Execute, Hansen. Island Hanul's fighter squadron suddenly shifted, from their scattered pattern into a formation resembling a crane's wing, a formation Admiral Yi Sun-sin had used in 1592 to defeat a superior Japanese fleet. The fighters drove directly into what appeared to be the swarm's core ships, the denser areas that seemed to coordinate its actions. Meanwhile, Ji-won activated the modified council vessels, which began emitting contradictory sensor readings. Some appeared as empty space, others as multiple ships, confusing the swarm's targeting systems. The swarm is trying to communicate between its parts, said Ji-won, monitoring the energy signals, but it's getting confused by our false signatures. The swarm's response was to gather more of itself together, forming a larger, more concentrated mass. It was adapting as they had known it would. It's preparing for a major attack, warned Sungmin. All our models suggest it will try to overwhelm us with sheer numbers now. Taeho nodded. Exactly as we expected. Sungmin, implement Myongyang Strait. 12 heavily armored vessels suddenly created a bottleneck, drawing the swarm into a narrow corridor of space where Unji's hidden weapons platforms activated, catching the enemy in devastating crossfire. The battle continued for hours, with the human-led fleet constantly changing tactics, never falling into predictable patterns. The Void Swarm, which had easily defeated the Council's best forces, found itself unable to counter the chaotic, ever-changing human strategies. On the Council observation deck, the tactical computers repeatedly crashed, trying to make sense of the battle unfolding before them. By all logical calculations, the human strategy should have failed catastrophically. Instead, the Void Swarm began to fragment and scatter for the first time since its appearance. They're winning, whispered the High Counselor, who had come to observe personally, using tactics that defy every rule of engagement we've established over 3,000 years of interstellar warfare. Admiral Zix finally spoke. They're not following rules at all. That's why they're winning. The swarm learned our rules. It can't learn tactics that change constantly and follow no logical pattern. Back on the battlefield, the tide had definitely turned. The swarm, used to enemies that followed predictable patterns, could not adapt quickly enough to the constantly changing human tactics. "The swarm is breaking apart," reported Sungmin. "It's losing cohesion." "Now for the final phase," said Taeho. "Execute Battle of the Bulge." This was the riskiest maneuver yet. Half of the fleet appeared to retreat in disarray, as if they had been defeated. The swarm, sensing victory, surged forward to engulf them. But it was a trap. The retreating ships led the swarm directly into range of the other half of the fleet, which had powered down to avoid detection. As the swarm passed them, they powered up suddenly and attacked from behind on all sides. "Now Hanul," ordered Taeho. Hanul's fighters executed their most complex dance pattern yet, the Chumkuk Mu, or sword dance. They spun and twisted through the heart of the swarm, their weapons firing in rhythmic patterns that confused and disoriented the enemy. "It's working," exclaimed Do-yoon. "The swarm is trying to retreat." Sure enough, the dark cloud was pulling back, its once cohesive structure now broken into fragmented pieces that moved without coordination. "Don't let it escape," Taeho ordered. "If it gets away, it will learn from this encounter. We need to destroy as much of it as we can." The human fleet pressed the attack, continuing to use unpredictable tactics that the swarm couldn't counter. Hour after hour, they pushed the advantage, destroying more and more of the enemy. On the council observation deck, what had started as skepticism had turned to amazement and then to celebration as the battle progressed. The High Counselor turned to Admiral Zix. "Give them the additional ships," he ordered. "All 200. If 50 ships could do this much damage, imagine what they could accomplish with the full force we promised." Admiral Zix nodded. "I'll give the order immediately." As the reinforcements arrived, Taeho directed them into the battle, incorporating them into his chaotic but effective strategy. With the additional firepower, they were able to surround what remained of this section of the Void Swarm. "We've got it contained," reported Sungmin. "It can't escape now." "Hanul," called Taeho over the comm. "Bring your fighters in for the final strike. Aim for what's left of the core." "Understood," she replied, executing Admiral Yi Sun-sin's final charge. Her fighters formed a tight arrow formation and drove straight into the heart of the remaining swarm. Their weapons fired in perfect sync, tearing through the dark mass. There was a moment of intense brightness as the swarm's energy was released. And then nothing. Where the dark cloud had been, there was only empty space and scattered debris. "Swarm signals have ceased," reported G1. "This section has been completely destroyed." A cheer went up throughout the fleet. Even the council observers were celebrating, their earlier skepticism forgotten. But Taeho remained serious. "This was only one section of the swarm," he reminded his team. "The main body is still out there, and now it will have data on our tactics. So we'll create new ones," said Yoonji confidently. "That's the advantage of human chaos, it's infinitely variable." Taeho nodded. "Have all ships return to base. We need to rest, repair, and plan for the next engagement." As the fleet headed back to the council station, the command ship received a direct communication from the High Counselor himself. "General Kim," said the alien leader, his tone respectful, "the council extends its gratitude for your unprecedented victory. The full 200 ships you requested are now under your command, along with any additional resources you require." The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Over 127 different alien species were represented here, from all corners of known space. Usually this room buzzed with conversation, debate, and the sounds of various translation devices. Today there was only silence as everyone waited. The huge doors at the end of the chamber slid open. General Taeho Kim entered, followed by his team of elderly human commanders. They wore their battle uniforms, now marked with signs of the long campaign they had just completed. Taeho walked slowly, leaning on a simple wooden cane, not from weakness, but because the final battle against the Void Swarm had left him with injuries that even advanced council medicine couldn't completely heal. Behind him came Ji-won, her mechanical arm showing damage that she had refused to have repaired until after the official report was given. Do-yoon limped slightly, while Sungmin's face bore a new scar across his right cheek. Hanul walked straight and proud despite the bandages visible beneath her uniform. Eunji had lost 2 fingers on her left hand, but she had already modified a mechanical replacement that worked better than the original. The human delegation made its way to the center of the chamber, where a circular platform allowed everyone to see them. The aliens watched in silence, their expressions unreadable to most humans. But Tejo had learned to recognize respect when he saw it, regardless of what species was showing it. The High Counselor rose from his seat. He was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the chamber's soft lighting. His forearms were held in a formal position that signified great importance. "For 50 years, he began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber, we have regarded humanity as an aggressive, primitive species barely worthy of membership in our enlightened coalition. There were murmurs of agreement from some of the older council members. Today, we acknowledge our error." The murmurs turned to surprised whispers. The High Counselor rarely admitted mistakes of any kind, let alone ones made by the entire council. "The Void Swarm has been driven back beyond the Cygnus Arm," he continued. 37 worlds that would have been consumed have been saved, and our most sophisticated tactical AIs are still unable to fully comprehend how a group of elderly humans accomplished what our combined fleets could not. Tejo exchanged glances with his team. Yunji suppressed a smile. Jiwon's cybernetic hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her chair. Hanul and Sungmin maintained the disciplined posture they'd held for over 50 years of service. "The final battle lasted 17 days, the High Counselor said, addressing not just the humans but the entire assembly. "The human commanders led our fleet of 200 ships against the main body of the Void Swarm. By all tactical projections, we should have lost. Our most advanced battle computers gave us a success probability of less than 2%. He gestured to a large display screen where images of the battle appeared. They showed council ships moving in patterns that defied conventional tactics, engaging the swarm in ways that looked chaotic but were clearly coordinated. General Kim and his team employed strategies based on something humans call asymmetric warfare. They used Earth historical battles as templates, modified for space combat. They incorporated cultural elements that have no place in military doctrine, according to our understanding. Dance patterns, music rhythms, even sports formations. The screen showed Hanul's fighters moving in perfect synchronization, following patterns based on traditional Korean dance. It showed larger ships positioned according to ancient battle formations that predated even Earth's first computer. "And it worked," the High Counselor said simply. "The Void Swarm, which had adapted to our perfect mathematical formations, could not adapt quickly enough to human unpredictability. Each time it began to understand a pattern, the humans would change to something entirely different." He turned directly to Tejo. "Our analysis suggests that the final destruction of the swarm was accomplished using a strategy based on an Earth battle called Kane. Can you explain this to the Council?" Tejo stepped forward, his voice strong despite his age and injuries. "The Battle of Kane took place over 2,000 years ago on Earth. A general named Hannibal defeated a much larger Roman army by using an unconventional formation. He had his center forces appear weak and retreat, drawing in the enemy. Meanwhile, his stronger forces on the flanks encircled and trapped the Romans." He gestured to the battle display. "We modified this concept for three-dimensional space combat. We appeared to retreat in multiple vectors, drawing the swarm into pursuit. Then our hidden forces closed from all directions, creating a spherical encirclement. The swarm found itself attacked from every direction at once with no logical escape pattern." The High Counselor nodded. "And the result was the complete destruction of the Void Swarm. Our sensors confirm no traces remain. The threat that we could not defeat with 3,000 years of military doctrine was eliminated by strategies from humanity's ancient past." He paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives of the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations. "The Council formally requests," he continued, "that humanity establish an ongoing strategic advisory role. Your unconventional thinking represents an aspect of tactical philosophy our civilization has lost in its pursuit of mathematical perfection." Tejo stepped forward, his voice strong despite his age. "We accept with one condition." The chamber tensed. Humans making demands was unprecedented. "The knowledge we share is not to create a more perfect algorithm or to be synthesized into your tactical computers. The strength of humanity is not in our technology or even our strategies, but in our chaos, our creativity, our irrationality. We will teach your people to think like humans, not your machines to calculate like us." After a moment of stunned silence, the High Counselor bowed deeply. a human gesture of respect that had never before been seen in the council chamber. "We accept your condition," he said. "The council recognizes that the mathematical perfection we have pursued for millennia has become a limitation. We have optimized our thinking to the point where we became predictable." An elderly council member from one of the oldest species in the galaxy spoke up. "I am curious, General Kim. Your team is composed entirely of older humans. Why did you not include younger soldiers with more physical strength and endurance?" Tejo smiled slightly. The Void Swarm was not defeated by physical strength but by experience and perspective. Young soldiers learn to fight according to current doctrine. Old warriors remember every doctrine they've ever used, every mistake they've ever made, every unexpected victory they've ever achieved. We have a lifetime of being wrong, being surprised, and adapting. That's what the swarm couldn't predict. The ancient alien nodded thoughtfully. There is wisdom in this approach. Perhaps our own retired military leaders should be consulted more often. The High Counselor raised all four of his hands, a gesture that called for attention. In recognition of humanity's service to the galaxy, the Council has prepared a formal declaration. A holographic document appeared in the air before Tejo. It was written in multiple languages, including Earth Standard. It officially recognized humanity as full and equal members of the Galactic Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. For 50 years, humans have been provisional members, the High Counselor explained. Today, that provisional status ends. Earth and all human colonies are now fully recognized sovereign territories within Council space. Tejo accepted the declaration with a formal bow. "On behalf of Earth and all humans, we are honored." After the ceremony, the human team gathered in a private room adjacent to the council chamber. They were tired but satisfied. The war was over. The Void Swarm was defeated, and humanity had a new place in the galactic community. "Did you see their faces when you mentioned teaching them to think like humans?" Duyun asked with a grin. Some of them looked terrified at the idea. "With good reason," said Jiwon, examining her damaged mechanical arm. "Most of these species have spent thousands of years eliminating unpredictability from their cultures. Asking them to embrace chaos is like asking water to flow uphill." "They'll learn," said Hanyul confidently. "Some of the younger pilots I trained were starting to understand by the end of the campaign. They even began creating their own dance-based flight patterns. Yunji was already working on designs for a new type of defensive system. The council engineers want to standardize everything we did. Create new algorithms based on our chaotic tactics. They still don't understand that the moment you standardize chaos, it stops being chaotic." Sungmin had been quiet, as was his nature. Now he spoke. "What will you tell the council tomorrow, Tejo?" "They expect a full briefing on human military doctrine." Tejo sat down, easing the weight off his injured leg. "I'll tell them the truth, that there is no single human military doctrine. That Earth's history is filled with different approaches, different philosophies, different ways of thinking about conflict. That's our strength. Not any one strategy, but our ability to change strategies. There is a saying among my people," he added. "The pine tree stays green in winter. Wisdom forgotten returns when needed most." "Poetic," commented Duyun, "and appropriate."